Black woman. Fired after saving 10-year-old boy. Next day, the president calls her. The late shift at St. Margaret's Hospital in Manhattan was always the longest. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Nurse Alicia Monroe, 36, finished charting her final patient notes. Her curly hair was tucked neatly into a navy scrub cap, and her dark brown eyes flicked toward the hallway with every shuffle of footsteps. She was tired, bone-tired. But she stayed alert, like she always did. Alicia had worked in emergency care for over a decade, long enough to know when something serious was coming, and that night she felt it before she saw it. At 11:43 p.m., the ER doors crashed open. Paramedics shouted over each other as they wheeled in a small motionless figure on a gurney. Male, approximately 10 years old, gunshot wound to the chest, no pulse en route. The room snapped to life. Monitors beeped, a crash cart was wheeled in, and Alicia was already moving toward the boy, gloves snapped on tight, adrenaline flooding her system. "What the hell happened?" she barked, checking for vitals as another nurse pushed oxygen tubes toward her. "Stray bullet." Central Harlem. Drive-by. Mom's in the ambulance behind. "The kid just dropped in the street." Alicia didn't speak. Her hands were already on the child. His skin was cold, lips pale, shirt soaked through with blood. Her training kicked in, but her heart twisted in her chest. He looked so small on the table. "Where's the trauma team?" she called out. "Stuck at the 59th Street pile-up," someone replied. She stared at the monitor, flat line. Alicia swallowed. Her next move would change everything. "Get me a thoracotomy tray." "Now." Another nurse froze. "You're not cleared for that. You're not a surgeon." "I don't care," Alicia said, voice tight. "If we wait 10 more minutes, this boy will be a body bag with a name. Move." There was a beat of hesitation, then the tray was in her hands. Alicia opened his chest with a quick incision, feeling the blood coat her gloves. She worked swiftly, her movements precise but fueled by urgency. Her mind flashed back to med school, to every simulation, every trauma code she'd ever observed. Her hands trembled only once, when the kid's ribs cracked under pressure. But she didn't stop. Someone behind her muttered, "This is career suicide." But Alicia wasn't listening. She was already massaging his heart. And then, blip. Everyone froze. "Did you see that?" a nurse whispered. Another blip, then a rhythm, then a beep. Faint, irregular, but real. Alicia exhaled in disbelief. He's back. People around her started to move again. Nurses reconnected IVs. Oxygen was stabilized. Blood pressure slowly crawled back into readable digits. They weren't out of the woods, but they were no longer in the dark. By the time the trauma team rushed in, faces flushed and frantic, Alicia had closed the incision with rudimentary stitches. She stepped back, arms red up to the elbows, eyes bloodshot but burning with clarity. "You saved him," one of the trauma surgeons murmured, scanning the monitor. Alicia nodded slowly, but there was no smile, just the gravity of what she had done. The head nurse pulled her aside as they cleaned up. Her tone was clipped. "That procedure was unauthorized." "You had no clearance." "I had no choice," Alicia said, wiping sweat off her forehead. "You always have a choice, and you chose wrong." The hallway went silent. The boy was alive, but the cost of saving him hadn't yet been tallied. By 7 a.m., Alicia sat in a sterile conference room facing 3 administrators in suits. The boy's blood still lingered under her fingernails. "We commend your intention," began Dr. Rachel Gellerman, the chief of staff. "But rules exist for a reason. If I'd followed the rules, that child would be dead," Alicia replied, her voice low but resolute. You performed an invasive emergency thoracotomy without surgical credentials in a hospital that explicitly forbids such action outside trauma supervision. You exposed the facility to liability, disregarded chain of command protocol, and potentially compromised a minor's long-term care. Gellerman's words were like needles, methodical. Ice cold. And yet, that child is alive today, Alicia said. He's breathing because I didn't wait for permission. Another board member leaned forward, hands clasped. Nurse Monroe, this isn't a moral debate. It's administrative procedure. You left us no choice. A long pause followed. Then a white envelope slid across the table. You're being terminated, effective immediately. Alicia didn't move. Her fingers were clenched in her lap. She wasn't surprised, but it still felt like a slap in the face. Am I allowed to know the boy's name? She asked softly. There was a hesitation. Then Gellerman replied, No, the family has requested privacy. Alicia nodded slowly and stood up. You may have stripped me of my badge, she said, voice quiet, but you can't take away what I did. I saved him. She walked out without another word. That night she sat alone in her apartment, rain trickling down the window pane. Her apartment felt colder than usual, the silence louder. She stared at the wall for what felt like hours. No job. No income, no future, but she didn't regret it. At 11:06 p.m., there was a knock at the door. Alicia opened it to find a sharply dressed man holding a white envelope sealed with a golden crest. Ms. Monroe, he said, expression unreadable. I represent the office of the President. You've been formally invited to Washington, D.C. Tomorrow morning. You'll be flown out at first light. Alicia blinked. Excuse me? He handed her the envelope. The President would like to thank you, in person. Then he turned and disappeared into the night. Inside the envelope, just 3 lines. You saved a life that changed the world. We'd like to speak with you. President Andrew L. Garner. Alicia stood motionless in her hallway, pulse thudding in her ears. Whatever storm she had walked into last night had just grown into something far bigger than she ever imagined. The hum of the private jet was almost too quiet. Alicia sat by the window, staring out at the endless stretch of clouds below. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, the envelope from the night before tucked safely into her purse beside her. Despite the luxurious cream leather seats and the warmth of the flight attendant's smile, she felt like she was floating in some surreal version of her life. Yesterday, she had been a nurse, unemployed and dismissed for saving a boy's life. Today, she was flying to Washington, D.C. at the request of the President of the United States. Would you like anything to drink, Miss Monroe? The attendant asked gently. Alicia shook her head. No, thank you, she said, her voice quieter than usual. She still couldn't make sense of any of it. She hadn't even had time to research who the boy was. She didn't know his name, only the weight of his tiny frame as she'd opened his chest and restarted his heart. And now, that child had apparently changed the course of her life. As the jet began its descent, she clutched the armrest. Her thoughts darted to her mother, who had always said, sometimes doing the right thing doesn't pay until it does. Alicia had never quite believed it. Until now. The motorcade waiting on the tarmac made her stomach twist with nerves. 3 black SUVs, tinted windows, and a driver holding a sign with her name in bold letters. Alicia Monroe. She stepped into the vehicle, the interior silent and cold, and tried to breathe through the tension building in her chest. 30 minutes later, the SUV rolled through the iron gates of the White House. Alicia's jaw tightened. It was even more intimidating up close. The columns, the guards, the immaculate hedges trimmed to perfection. Her palms were slick with sweat. She was led inside by a woman in a dark navy blazer. "Please follow me. The president will see you shortly," the woman said crisply, with the professional polish of someone used to guiding dignitaries. Alicia's sneakers squeaked softly against the marble floors. Her breath hitched as they passed portraits of past presidents and first ladies lining the halls. The entire place felt sacred, heavy with history. They stopped in front of two massive doors, guarded by a pair of Secret Service agents. The woman turned to Alicia, offering a small smile. "He's waiting for you inside. Just knock once." Alicia took a deep breath, raised her hand, and knocked. A voice from within responded, "Come in." She pushed open the door slowly. The room was spacious, sunlight pouring through tall windows. At the far end stood a tall man in a charcoal suit, his back to her as he looked out toward the south lawn. He turned, and Alicia felt her pulse stutter. President Andrew L. Garner looked every bit as commanding as he did on television. Mid-50s, salt and pepper hair, clear blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. But it wasn't his presence that caught Alicia off guard. It was the warmth in his expression. "Alicia Monroe," he said, walking toward her and extending his hand. "It's a privilege to meet you." She shook his hand, trying to keep her voice from cracking. "Mr. President, I'm not sure I understand why I'm here." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Please, sit." She sat stiffly as he returned to his chair, then leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "I'll get right to it," he said. "The child you saved, his name is Elias Vega. He's the son of Ambassador Rafael Vega from Costa Rica. They were here visiting New York for a diplomatic summit. That bullet was never meant for him. Wrong place, wrong time." Alicia's breath caught. "I had no idea." "I know," Garner said softly. "And yet you did what no one else could. You saved him at great personal cost." She bit the inside of her cheek. "I broke hospital rules. I overstepped. You broke protocol," Garner agreed. "But you did not break the oath that matters most. You saved a child's life. That's why I called you here." He opened a folder on his desk and pushed it toward her. Alicia hesitated, then reached for it. Inside was a detailed letter, an official commendation from the White House, recognizing her bravery and actions in service of human life and justice, regardless of rank or reward. Her hands trembled. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," the president replied. "But I want to offer you more than thanks. I want to talk about something bigger." She looked up, confused. He continued. "You've spent years working in the system. You know where it's broken, where it's slow, where it fails people who can't afford to wait. I have a proposal. I want you to help me lead a new initiative on emergency response ethics and healthcare equity. Your insight, your experience, your courage. I need someone like you in the room." Alicia's breath caught in her throat. "Mr. President, I'm just a nurse." "You're exactly who this country needs," he said. "That's why I'm not asking you to be someone you're not. I'm asking you to be exactly who you were that night in the ER, someone who chose life over fear." The silence between them was heavy, but not uncomfortable. Alicia stared at the folder in her lap, the seal of the president embossed in gold. It wasn't just a letter, it was a door. Her voice was soft when she finally spoke. "I lost my job yesterday, and today," Garner said with a small smile, "you're standing at the start of something much bigger." The president stood and extended his hand again. Alicia rose, clasping his hand with more steadiness this time. "Welcome to the team, Miss Monroe," he said. Outside, the press had no idea what had just happened behind closed doors. But Alicia Monroe, fired yesterday for doing the right thing, had just been handed a national platform. and her journey was only beginning. Alicia stared at the closed door long after President Garner had stepped out. The weight of everything that had just happened pressed down on her like a thick blanket. She had come to D.C. with nothing but questions and unease, and now she was walking away with an official invitation to help shape a national healthcare initiative. It should have felt triumphant. But somehow it felt heavy, complicated. Later that night, Alicia sat curled up on the stiff white couch in the government-assigned guest suite at the Hay Adams Hotel, just across Lafayette Square from the White House. The view outside was surreal, monuments lit like paintings, tourists snapping photos beneath streetlights, all while her phone buzzed non-stop on the coffee table. News had leaked. Someone from the diplomatic delegation must have spoken to a reporter. Headlines had started to surface online. Fired nurse saved diplomat's son. Now the White House steps in. Heroic black nurse terminated after saving 10-year-old receives presidential invite. Her inbox was flooded. Some were thank yous. Some were skeptical. And then there were the trolls, those who questioned her story, her motives, even her competence. The internet didn't wait to choose sides. And it didn't wait to attack. She picked up her phone, scrolled briefly, and then locked the screen again. She wasn't ready to face the noise. Instead, she let her head fall back against the cushion and closed her eyes. The knock at the door startled her. Alicia opened it cautiously to find a familiar face. Lucas Carrington, the president's senior advisor, whom she'd met briefly after the meeting. Tall, black, mid-40s, with a quiet intensity. He offered a sympathetic smile. "May I come in?" he asked. She stepped aside, gesturing him in. "You work late." "We all do around here," Lucas said, settling into the armchair across from her. "Especially when something this big hits the press faster than we expected." "You didn't expect this?" "Not this fast. And not this loud." He folded his hands. "But it was inevitable." Alicia let out a soft, bitter laugh. "Because I'm black. Because I'm a nurse who dared to save a kid without signing permission slips first." Lucas's expression didn't shift. "Because you represent change, and people fear change. Especially when it doesn't ask for permission." She sat up straighter. "What does the president expect from me exactly? I'm not a policy expert." "I'm not some strategist." "No," Lucas said, his voice calm but firm. "You're someone who did the right thing when it was hard. That's rarer than you'd think. And exactly why we want your voice in the room." He paused, then leaned forward slightly. "But Alicia, before you walk into this storm, there's something else you should know." Her eyes narrowed. "What?" Lucas pulled out a tablet from his briefcase and opened a file. On the screen were transcripts, emails, meeting notes, internal memos from the hospital board. Some of them dated back months. Alicia leaned in. "These were leaked anonymously. We verified their authenticity," Lucas said. "They show that the hospital had been under quiet pressure from a local medical lobbying group. You didn't just break protocol, you became a liability." She stared at the screen. "So I was set up to take the fall." "Not exactly. But they were looking for someone to make an example of. And when you saved that boy and bypassed the chain of command, they saw an opportunity." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They were willing to let a child die to protect their system." Lucas didn't answer directly. He didn't need to. Alicia's stomach turned. "And now they'll spin it like I was unstable. Overreacting. They'll say I was emotional, that I endangered the boy. That's why you need to speak," Lucas said. "Not just in closed-door meetings, but publicly." "I didn't ask for this." "No," he said, "but it found you. And how you respond now, That's going to define everything that comes next. Alicia looked down at her hands, her fingers curled into fists. She had walked away from the hospital with nothing, no job, no allies, just a bruised sense of purpose. But now she had something more dangerous, the truth. She sat in silence for a long moment before speaking. Then let's start with the hospital board. Lucas raised an eyebrow. They want a public reckoning, she said, her voice steadier now. Let's give them one. The next morning, Alicia stood before a podium at a hastily organized press conference outside the Hay Adams. Dozens of reporters crowded in front of her, the breeze tugging at her dark navy blazer. She cleared her throat, her heart pounding. My name is Alicia Monroe. I'm a registered nurse. 2 nights ago, I performed emergency surgery on a 10-year-old boy who had been shot in the chest. I didn't wait for permission because I didn't have time. If I had waited, he would be dead. Flashes went off. Microphones pushed closer. The next day I was fired, not suspended, not questioned. Fired? She paused, letting that word hang in the air. I didn't do what I did for praise. I did it because I took an oath to save lives. But what's become clear since is that this wasn't just about one decision. It's about a system that punishes people for doing what's right when it challenges hierarchy. She glanced toward the cameras. You'll hear that I broke rules, that I endangered a child. But ask yourself, why was a nurse the only one in that ER when a dying boy came through the doors? Why was there no trauma team? No surgeon? And why was the system more concerned about paperwork than a pulse? Reporters murmured, pens scribbling. I stand by what I did. And if I had to choose again, I'd save that child every single time. As Alicia stepped away from the podium, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged. And in that moment, she knew the storm had only just begun. But this time, she wasn't afraid of it. She was walking straight into it. The footage played on loop across the nation. Alicia Monroe at the podium, eyes steady, voice firm, asking the question that no one from the hospital board dared to answer. Why was a nurse the only one there when a child was dying? By the time Alicia returned to her suite, the press conference had gone viral. Social media lit up with hashtags. #StandWithAlicia and #Nurses Are Heroes. For every troll questioning her qualifications, there were dozens more praising her courage. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was becoming a symbol. But symbols carry weight, and with weight comes backlash. By that evening, a letter appeared in her email, unsigned but clearly leaked from within the hospital system. It alleged Alicia had violated multiple hospital policies beyond protocol, improper handling of controlled equipment, reckless endangerment, and even patient negligence in past cases. All lies, and all carefully timed. Lucas called the moment it dropped. They're trying to bury you, he said, voice clipped, no pleasantries. They're hoping the public will turn before you gain more momentum. Alicia stared at the email, rage simmering under her calm exterior. They're afraid. Yes, Lucas agreed, because the more people listen to you, the more the system looks fragile. Alicia sighed, her fingers tightening around her phone. So what do? We expose them, Lucas said without hesitation. But we have to be smart. The next day, Alicia was invited to a primetime interview on a major national news network. The host, Diane Keller, was known for her sharp questions and no-nonsense demeanor. Alicia knew it wouldn't be easy, but that's why she said yes. Under the harsh studio lights, Alicia sat upright in her chair, a calm presence amid the whirlwind. Miss Monroe, Diane began, you've quickly become a polarizing figure. Some say you're a hero. Others say you're reckless. How do you respond? Alicia didn't blink. I say that I saved a life. And if the system thinks that's reckless, then the system is broken. Diane leaned in. What about the accusations being leveled at you now? Claims of previous misconduct? I expected that, Alicia said. But every patient I've treated, every chart I've filled, every decision I've made is documented. I've never once had a complaint, until now, after I spoke out. That should tell you something. The audience in the studio was silent. The tension was electric. But this isn't just about me, Alicia continued. This is about every nurse who's ever been told to keep quiet. Every healthcare worker who's been punished for speaking out. Every black woman who's been labeled difficult the moment she raises her voice. By the time the interview aired, Alicia's following exploded. Nurses' unions began to speak up. Healthcare professionals flooded her inbox with support. A former ER technician even came forward anonymously, confirming that the trauma team's absence the night of the incident wasn't due to miscommunication. It had been a staffing cut, quietly implemented to save money. The hospital board was scrambling. Behind closed doors, they were losing control, and then an unexpected twist. A woman named Regina Cole, a former administrator at Midtown Regional, the very hospital that fired Alicia, contacted Lucas's office. She claimed to have been forced out months earlier after raising concerns about unethical administrative decisions, including pressure to reduce emergency staffing and prioritize cost saving over patient care. She had documentation. Lucas met with her in a secure location in Arlington. What she provided was damning. Budget memos showing that the hospital had been deliberately cutting corners for over a year. Emails revealing that board members were aware of the risks and chose to silence internal warnings. And most shocking, internal chat logs where Alicia's name was discussed before the incident, hinting that she was viewed as too assertive and not a team player. They had already marked her. Lucas returned with the evidence that could tip the scale. That night, Alicia stood in front of the cameras again, this time flanked by healthcare workers, civil rights advocates, and Lucas himself. I was fired not because I broke a rule, Alicia said, but because I refused to stay silent in a system that puts policy over people, and now we have proof. She held up a printed email, highlighted lines visible to every lens in the room. This is what retaliation looks like. This is what fear looks like, but I'm not afraid anymore. In the crowd, someone shouted, "We're with you." Cheers erupted. The tide was turning. Alicia could feel it. The following morning, Midtown Regional Hospital issued a press release stating they were conducting a formal internal investigation and placing several board members on administrative leave, but it wasn't enough. Alicia met with a group of national nursing leaders and proposed something radical, a whistleblower protection fund for healthcare workers, a legal safety net for those who dared to speak up. The idea gained traction fast. As she stood at the window of her hotel that evening, watching the city shimmer below, Alicia knew things were shifting. She had stepped into a battle much bigger than she imagined, but now she wasn't alone. Now she had voices rising with hers, and somewhere deep in the White House, the president was watching, quietly impressed, quietly preparing for what was to come next. The call came just after midnight. Alicia sat in bed, wide awake, her phone buzzing on the nightstand. The city outside her hotel window glowed faintly, a blurred mixture of brake lights, neon signs, and shadows. Her thoughts had been too loud to sleep, memories of the child on the gurney, the cold stares of the hospital board, the press conference replaying in her head like a loop she couldn't pause. Unknown caller. Her thumb hovered over the green button, hesitation lingering for a split second. Then she answered. Ms. Monroe? The voice was calm, measured. Male. Please don't hang up. This is Robert Langston. I'm calling from the West Wing of the White House on behalf of President Rachel Ward. Alicia blinked. I'm sorry. The White House? Yes, ma'am. The President would like to speak with you. A pause.
Is this a joke? No, Ms. Monroe. She's on the line. Then another voice.
Warm, direct, and unmistakably presidential. Ms. Monroe, President Ward said, I've been following your story. I want to thank you, not only for what you did that night in the ER, but for the courage you've shown since. Would you be willing to meet with me privately? Alicia didn't answer right away. Her heart pounded against her ribs. She sat up in bed, pushing the covers aside as if it would help her process what was happening. Yes, she said finally, her voice shaking slightly. Yes, ma'am. I'd be honored. We'll have a car outside your hotel at 7:30 a.m., President Ward replied. And Alicia, don't let them change who you are. What you did was right. The line went dead. Alicia stared at her phone, the screen now blank. For the first time in days, the constant weight in her chest lightened. The next morning, Washington moved like a machine, efficient, polished, and protected by gates, guards, and unspoken power. Alicia had never been to D.C. before, and now she found herself stepping out of a sleek black SUV into the manicured circle drive of the White House. The sun had just cleared the horizon, bathing the East Wing in soft light. A young aide met her at the entrance. Ms. Monroe, this way, please. They walked briskly down a series of immaculate corridors. The air was crisp, cool with the faint scent of leather and polished wood. Portraits of past presidents lined the walls, watching, judging, remembering. She was led to a private study, modest by White House standards, where President Rachel Ward waited by the window in a tailored navy pantsuit. The president turned as Alicia entered and offered a warm smile. Thank you for coming, Alicia. I still can't believe this is happening, Alicia said as she shook the president's hand. I thought I was going to be job hunting today. Instead, I'm here. You're here, President Ward said, because you stood up when others stayed silent. I watched your interview with Diane Keller. It moved me. The president motioned for her to sit, then followed, folding her hands on the desk. I want to hear the whole story, from your perspective, she said, so Alicia told her, every moment. Every decision, every threat, and every doubt. She told her about the night of the shooting, the dying boy, the absent trauma team, and the moment she realized no one else was coming. She told her about the surgery, the boardroom ambush, and the smear campaign that followed. President Ward listened intently, never interrupting. When Alicia finished, the room fell quiet for a long moment. That hospital failed you, the president said at last. But more than that, it failed every patient who walks through its doors expecting to be treated with dignity. Alicia nodded. And they're not the only ones. You're right, President Ward replied. And that's why I'm asking for your help. Alicia blinked. My help? We're launching a federal initiative, the Monroe Directive. It's aimed at protecting medical whistleblowers, increasing accountability in hospital boards, and implementing national standards for trauma response. And I want you to be the face of it. Alicia stared at her, stunned. I'm a nurse. I've never led anything at that level. But you've led something much harder, President Ward said. You led with your conscience, not your comfort. That's exactly who we need. Alicia sat in silence, the words settling around her like a weight she hadn't expected to carry, but somehow knew she had to. This would mean testifying, the president added, helping us build legislation, speaking to media, traveling. You think people will listen to me? I think they already are.
Alicia exhaled, the air in her lungs shaky. "Okay," she said. "Then I'll do it." President Ward smiled. "You've just made history." As Alicia left the White House an hour later, the gravity of it all hit her. Her phone was already buzzing. Her name was trending again, but this time it was because she had just walked out of the West Wing. She glanced at the alert on her screen. A new headline: President taps nurse fired after saving child for National Health Reform Plan. She smiled softly to herself. The system had tried to silence her, to discredit her, to make her question her worth. But now she was writing a new chapter, not just for herself, but for every nurse, every caregiver, every truth-teller who had been forced into the shadows. The White House gates closed behind her, but Alicia Munro had just stepped into a bigger fight, and this time the country was watching. The Capitol hearing room was brighter than Alicia expected, overexposed by rows of recessed lighting that made even the polished mahogany seem sterile. The room buzzed with hushed voices and tapping keyboards. Journalists filled the gallery, their eyes locked on the woman at the front table. Alicia Munro sat with her hands folded in her lap, her tailored navy blue suit neat, her curls pulled back, her eyes steady. Just days ago, she'd been standing quietly behind hospital curtains. Now she was in front of the most powerful lawmakers in the country, about to deliver testimony that could tear open a deeply buried wound in the American healthcare system. To her right sat Senator Grace Lawton, chair of the Health Oversight Committee, known for her sharp mind and no-nonsense demeanor. She had personally requested Alicia's presence after reviewing the footage and transcripts of the Monroe Directive proposal. "Alicia," Lawton had said in their prep meeting, "this isn't just about one hospital anymore. This is about how we fail those who do the right thing." When the gavel sounded, the room hushed. The proceedings began. "Ms. Monroe," Senator Lawton said, her voice cutting clean through the silence, "you may begin your testimony." Alicia took a breath and looked up. "Thank you, Madam Chair." She paused. The microphone picked up her breath. "My name is Alicia Munro. I've been a nurse for 11 years, and I lost my job for saving a child's life." A murmur ran through the room, a ripple of discomfort. She leaned forward. "I was working the night shift when a 10-year-old boy was rushed into our ER with a gunshot wound to the chest. There was no trauma team, no surgeon, no clearance, just a dying child. So I acted." She described the moments that followed, the cold silence from hospital administration, the sterile brutality of the boardroom, the calculated public distancing from hospital leadership. But she didn't stop there. "This isn't just about me," she continued. "I've heard from dozens of healthcare workers since that night. Nurses who were fired for speaking up, doctors punished for defying dangerous protocol. This system doesn't just fail patients, it punishes those trying to protect them." At one point, a Republican senator from Wyoming interrupted. "Ms. Munro, you admit that you acted outside of your role. Do you understand why that's problematic?" Alicia didn't flinch. "Senator, I didn't act outside of my role. I acted inside my purpose, to preserve life. Isn't that the point of medicine?" Applause erupted from the gallery, despite the moderator's attempts to quiet it. Senator Lawton cracked the smallest smile. After Alicia finished, the committee entered deliberations. Her testimony had made national news within minutes. Cable anchors replayed her words with bold headlines. "Nurse turned whistleblower shakes up Capitol Hill." But behind the scenes, Alicia's stand had rattled more than just the press. At her former hospital, the CMO, Dr. Byron Wallace, had seen the clip mid-lunch and dropped his fork. His assistant watched as the color drained from his face. "Should I prepare a response, sir?" "No," he muttered. It's already too late. Within hours, more stories emerged. Anonymous nurses leaked documents.
Former patients came forward. Local media camped outside the hospital entrance. A once untouchable institution was unraveling, one truth at a time. Meanwhile, Alicia had returned to her hotel with a mind spinning from the day's events. She was exhausted, but she couldn't rest, not yet. Her phone vibrated. A text from Maria, her closest friend and former colleague. "You didn't just speak for you today. You spoke for all of us. I'm proud of you." Alicia smiled and typed back, "This isn't over." The next morning, as Alicia prepared for another round of interviews and public briefings, her team advisor, assigned by the White House, stepped into her suite. "You might want to sit down," he said, holding a printed memo. "What now?" she asked, bracing herself. "Dr. Wallace just resigned." Alicia's heart stopped. "What?" "Effective immediately." "And he's not the only one. 4 board members stepped down too. There's pressure from the governor's office to launch a state inquiry." Alicia dropped into the nearest chair, stunned. "So, we're making cracks in the wall." He nodded. "More than cracks. You're tearing it down." Later that evening, Alicia received an invitation to a prime-time town hall on national television. Hosted by a leading journalist, the panel would feature healthcare workers, former patients, legal experts, and Alicia. Her voice was now part of the national conversation, but even with the spotlight, Alicia remained grounded. Her nights were still sleepless, her mornings still anxious. She missed the rhythms of hospital life, the soft beeps and midnight shifts, the quiet dignity of caring for strangers. But she knew she couldn't go back, not yet, maybe never. Now she had to finish what she started. As she stood before the mirror that night, adjusting her blazer for another interview, Alicia whispered to herself, "You didn't ask for this fight, but you're in it now." And in that moment, she realized she didn't just want justice. She was determined to rebuild something better. Not just for herself, but for every voice that had been silenced before hers. The morning after the Capitol hearing, Alicia Monroe woke up to a world that no longer ignored her. Her name trended nationwide. News anchors debated her every word. Commentators praised her as a hero or painted her as a reckless rule-breaker. But one thing was clear. No one could look away now. Outside her hotel, a small group of supporters held handmade signs that read, "Nurses deserve respect," and "Alicia Monroe saved a life. Now she's saving the system." Some waved, others simply stood in quiet solidarity. Alicia saw them through her window as she sipped black coffee, hands trembling not from caffeine, but from the weight of it all. There was no turning back. Her inbox was flooded with messages, some from strangers thanking her for standing up, others from fellow healthcare workers sharing stories of their own punishments for doing the right thing. And then there were the messages she couldn't ignore. One came from the office of the president. Subject line, "Request for immediate meeting. Private." The email was short but unmistakable in tone. Alicia had been summoned to the White House for a private meeting with President Aaron Whitman. She stared at the message for minutes before responding. Later that day, she found herself once again stepping into a black SUV with tinted windows flanked by federal agents, this time not as an accused professional, not as a symbol, but as someone who had managed to rattle the system hard enough that the highest office in the land had taken notice. The ride to the White House was quiet. She sat back against the leather seat, eyes closed, replaying every step that had brought her here, from the chaotic emergency room to the cold hospital boardroom, and then the glowing Capitol dome, where her voice had cracked something open. As the gates of the White House opened and the car rolled past Secret Service checkpoints, Alicia swallowed the lump in her throat. She'd imagined this place once or twice as a kid, maybe on a school trip. But this wasn't a field trip. This was real, and she was walking straight into the heart of American power. She was ushered into the Roosevelt room. A familiar man waited for her, tall, white-haired, measured in both voice and presence. President Aaron Whitman rose from his chair and extended a hand. "Missin' Monroe," he said with a calm authority, "thank you for coming on short notice." Alicia shook his hand, her nerves buzzing. "I wasn't exactly going to say no," she said, managing a small, dry laugh. The president gestured for her to sit. A senior advisor remained at his side, silent but attentive. "I watched your hearing," President Whitman said. "Twice. You didn't just hold your own, Alicia. You cut through the noise. And I'll be honest with you, I've been looking for someone exactly like you." Alicia blinked, confused. "Sir? You've exposed something we've known for a long time but haven't had the courage to address fully. The institutional silencing of frontline healthcare workers. The fear-based culture that keeps people quiet. Your story is personal, but the implications are systemic. That's why I want to offer you something." She braced herself, unsure what was coming. "We're creating a presidential task force for healthcare ethics and accountability. It's long overdue, and I want you to lead it." The room fell into silence. "Lead it?" she repeated, stunned. "I'm a nurse. I'm not a politician." "That's exactly why you're the right person," Whitman replied. "This job needs a truth teller, someone who understands the consequences of inaction, not in theory, but in blood and sweat and heartbreak. Someone who knows how it feels to be punished for saving a life." Alicia's mouth went dry. She wasn't sure what to say, but then her phone vibrated in her bag. She ignored it. This moment was bigger. "I don't have experience running government programs," she said honestly. "I've never written a policy brief. I don't have an entourage." "You have something more powerful," Whitman said, leaning forward. "You have credibility, and you have the country's attention." Alicia stared at the presidential seal embroidered on the carpet beneath their feet. Her thoughts raced. She thought of the young boy's eyes fluttering open after surgery. She thought of Maria crying over the phone when Alicia lost her job. She thought of every nurse who messaged her after the hearing, whispering truths into the inbox of a stranger who had spoken what they couldn't. "I'll need a team," she said finally. "I'll need support and real authority, not just photo ops." "You'll have it," the president said without pause. "Full access. Cabinet-level meetings, media briefings. We'll announce it together next week." "You'll set the tone." Alicia nodded slowly, still trying to catch up with the moment, and then, as if fate had to remind her where she came from, her phone vibrated again. This time she checked it. A message from a burner number. "You think you're changing the world? Watch your back." Her stomach turned. She didn't show it. Instead, she calmly turned the screen off and slid it back into her bag. President Whitman noticed the shift in her face. "Something wrong?" he asked. Alicia looked him straight in the eye. "No," she said. "Just a reminder that I'm on the right path." He nodded with respect. "You'll have enemies, but you'll also have this office behind you. And I think we both know the truth has waited long enough." She stood up, shook his hand again, this time with purpose. "When do we start?" "Monday," he said. "But between now and then, rest." "You've earned it." As Alicia left the Roosevelt room, escorted past corridors filled with portraits of the nation's past, she realized that her story was no longer just about injustice. It was about building something new, and she wasn't walking alone anymore. The grand conference hall inside the White House was buzzing with cameras, reporters, and political staffers. Alicia Monroe stood just beyond the velvet curtain, adjusting the cuff of her navy blue blazer, trying to quiet her racing thoughts. Behind her, a senior communications aide gave her a quick nod.
She was moments away from stepping onto the national stage again. But this time, not as a nurse on trial, not as a whistleblower, but as the newly appointed chair of the Presidential Task Force for Healthcare Ethics and Accountability. Outside the curtain, President Whitman was wrapping up his introduction. And in light of the bravery, integrity, and unwavering moral compass shown by this extraordinary woman, it is with pride and full confidence that I introduce to you Alicia Monroe. Applause thundered through the room as Alicia stepped into the lights. She blinked, not because of the flashes, but because the weight of this moment, this culmination, was something no medical textbook could have ever prepared her for. She approached the podium and placed her hands on either side. A large screen behind her displayed her name in bold letters, alongside the seal of the Department of Health and Human Services. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady but charged with emotion. "A year ago, I stood in an emergency room trying to keep a child from slipping away. What I didn't know then was that I would lose my job for doing what I believed was right. What I didn't expect was that doing the right thing would one day bring me here." She paused, scanning the room. "I'm not here because I followed every rule. I'm here because I chose to follow my conscience. And I know I'm not the only one. Across this country there are nurses, doctors, EMTs, and caregivers who go to work every day under systems that punish their humanity. That ends today." Alicia laid out the task force's first initiatives: a national whistleblower protection policy for healthcare workers, federal funding for ethics training in hospitals, and a real-time reporting platform for patient care violations. As the press conference ended, Alicia stepped away from the microphone and was immediately approached by familiar faces, reporters, healthcare advocates, even former patients who'd come to support her. But one face stood out. It was Michelle Dawson, the hospital administrator who had fired Alicia not long after the surgery that saved the boy's life. She looked stiff, uncomfortable, clearly out of place in a room that now celebrated the very person she had once dismissed. Alicia approached her calmly. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said. Michelle's voice was low. "I came to see what you turned this into. I thought you were reckless." "Maybe I still do, but I was wrong about one thing. You're not weak. And you didn't just survive the system, you changed it." Alicia didn't gloat. She just nodded and extended her hand. "I didn't come here to prove you wrong," she replied. "I came here to prove what's right." Michelle hesitated, then shook her hand before slipping away into the crowd. As Alicia left the press hall, her phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Devon, the 10-year-old boy she had saved. A simple video attachment played. He was holding up a handmade card with glitter and stickers, smiling big as he said, "Thank you for being brave when no one else was." Her eyes welled with tears. Later that evening, Alicia returned to her modest apartment, not because she had to, but because it grounded her. The same couch where she once sat broken after her termination now felt different. Not because the place had changed, but because she had. A segment on the evening news recapped her appointment. A clip played of her speech, then cut to testimonials from other healthcare workers across the country who were inspired to speak up. She turned down the volume and sat quietly. A year ago, no one would have believed a black nurse fired for breaking protocol would one day hold the power to reshape the very system that cast her out. But Alicia knew that wasn't the miracle. The miracle was that the truth, when spoken boldly, lived consistently, and shared bravely, could actually move mountains. She grabbed a notebook and scribbled down a quote she once read, one she never understood until now. "Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quiet voice at the end of the day that says, 'I'll try again tomorrow.'" That had been her. And now that voice was echoing in halls far louder than she'd ever imagined.
To every nurse, to every woman of color, to everyone who's been told to stay quiet, this story is for you. Justice takes time, but it comes. If you found Alicia's journey inspiring, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Tell us, what would you have done in her place? How do you think systems can change when individuals step up? And most importantly, what does courage look like to you? Let's talk about it. Justice begins when we dare to speak.